symbol, I think, of what is wrong with the two parties, that the two parties, they're bought and paid for, they manipulate the process, and they claim to be, legitimate and representing the interests of the people, but they're actually, doing the opposite. And as RFK Jr. said, that he was actually more of a threat to, to Republicans if you were looking at who might vote for him, or who might vote, for which candidate if you weren't in the race, but that the Republicans were not trying to throw him off. It was the Democrats who were trying to throw him off, until he, threw in with Trump, and then they were suing to like keep him on the ballot. So it's just, it's ridiculous. And as far as we're concerned, this is a symptom of what's wrong with this system and these parties that are basically bought and paid for, and they're violating, not only the interests of third parties, but fundamentally the right of voters. Voters are demanding, other choices. And, before this election had really started, in the most recent Gallup poll, the numbers were off the charts at an all-time record high, that people were demanding other choices because the two parties had done such a poor job of serving the public interest.
Dr. Stein, I wanted to ask you, so I think a lot of people are very sympathetic and interested in your campaign because they see you as one of the only candidates, the only candidate with a large amount of ballot access who is opposing the genocide in Gaza. But they may not see how a vote for you is more than a protest vote at this point, given the nature of this locked-in two-party system that we have. So can you explain your theory of power? I mean, should people see that as just a protest vote? Is that enough to feel like I'm taking a moral stand against this genocide or against other issues that you represent and the two major party candidates don't? Or is there a theory of power behind this, that a vote for you translates into some broader political change down the road?
Yeah, exactly. This is my third run. We wouldn't be here had we not had the two prior runs to basically build recognition, to build support for our agenda, which has essentially become the agenda that the progressive Democrats give lip service to for the most part. That is, a Green New Deal, free public higher education, ending student debt, reparations, Medicare for all, healthcare as a human right. I mean, these are all issues which were specifically launched into the national dialogue through Green candidates, beginning with Ralph Nader back in the 2000 election, launching Medicare for all. So, there's a very concrete process by which you build power. And in the system that we currently have, which is so steeply tilted, the playing field, so steeply tilted towards big money and the power of big corporations and special interests to buy influence, it's not something that one overcomes in a single run. You have to really run repeatedly. You have to build name recognition to where we are now, that most people really understand that, that we are the party of peace. We are the party of the public interest. We are the party that would definitively deal with climate change. And in this race, especially where genocide is a huge issue, I would say that it's not simply a symbolic act, that if you vote for genocide, you're basically affirming it, you're endorsing it, you're affirming genocide at a time, that most Americans are absolutely horrified by this genocide, and in fact, not only want an immediate diplomatic solution, but also want an immediate weapons embargo to Israel. So the American people feel very strongly, and every vote for our campaign is a shot across the bow of the empire, telling them that we are here and we're growing. And, if we wind up with 5, 10, even 15% of the vote, and that really depends on whether the word gets out. I don't know if you have read the commentary on the Breakfast Club interview, but, we were basically being ambushed by Democratic Party attack dogs, as we often are, and it completely backfired on them, as it usually does. And to read the comments, you'll see, and there are, maybe 20,000 comments now on the main posting. people are saying, I wasn't going to vote for before. I wasn't going to vote at all because there was nothing to vote for. But now, I've been persuaded that I'm going to register green and vote green. So, our particular demographic is people who are not voting. In 2020, that was 1 out of every 3 voters, eligible voters, that is, who didn't vote. So don't they deserve a vote as well? And if the word were to get out and those people get out and register, we could really see this election turned on its head in a 4-way race, which this is, because in most states, RFK is still on the ballot.
Right.
You basically have 3 pro-genocide, pro-war candidates, and you have our one anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker, climate emergency campaign that could unify a lot of votes. In a 4-way race, an election can be won with as little as 26% of the vote. So the hurdles are not out of sight. And let me just say, it's a second major propaganda campaign that we, the people, are powerless and that resistance is futile. Well, we believe, as Frederick Douglass said, that power concedes nothing without a demand. And if you simply vote for the lesser evil, there is no record that there is a strong demand to end the genocide. So whatever the outcome of the election, recording that there is a substantial portion of the electorate that really wants an end to the genocide, that wants healthcare as a human right, that wants to end student debt and have free public higher education and so on. To have that actually represented by a number gives those issues real traction, which they don't have if they are disappeared by this mythology of lesser evil.
Let me just push you on that a little bit, because in 2016, in fact, you would know the numbers. Quite a lot of people did vote for you because they felt that way. They felt, I can't with either of these candidates, and here's someone who more closely represents my political ideology, and I'm going to support her. And I didn't see the Democratic Party see that as like, oh, we got to take these issues more seriously. In fact, in a lot of ways, what I saw was them moving further to the right, demonizing the left, painting you and anyone who would support you as a Putin puppet, and completely trying to marginalize any of that legitimate criticism of the party. So why would it be different this time?
Well, first, let me just, remind you that there was a huge smear campaign going on against me at the time.
Oh,
and I was actually then, I was investigated for 3 years by the Senate Intelligence Committee, who were trying to find some substance to this charge, and had they been able to find any evidence, you can be sure that, I would not be walking free. I would certainly have been charged with being a foreign agent, which is a 15-year jail sentence. They could not find a darn thing, and they wound up giving me basically a full exoneration and saying there was absolutely no evidence of wrongdoing whatsoever. But that required my full-time energy and focus and commitment. And you really rely on having your candidate basically translate the momentum from the campaign into the growth of the party. And we wound up being basically standing still. And, we now have evidence that they are also, launching infiltration campaigns and spies and all that. So we were tied up by a number of things that, were circumstantial, and I don't think will be the case this time. Also, if you've only had about 1 or 1.5% of the vote, that's entirely different from if you begin to get 4 or 5%. And as you well know, at 5%, you then not only do you ensure your ballot access in many of the states, so you don't have to spend your first 9 months just getting into the barred gates. You actually can begin the election full bore. But also we would then basically receive federal funding for the general election in the next presidential race. So we would begin to have a whole lot more resources to build. And, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You have to build from where you are if you're ever going to proceed. And this mythology that it's a wasted vote is part of the propaganda of really silencing opposition. And if people are happy, with the genocide, if they are happy with the expanding war, which, is just on the verge of major regional and potentially even global and nuclear confrontation, yeah, sure. Why bother resisting? But there are many people who feel that we have crossed now many red lines. Our democracy, we don't have to wait for Donald Trump, for real threats real fascist threats to our democracy.
When I speak, so one of the things
No.
I'll put on the face of like a Democrat, let's say I live in North Carolina or Georgia or a state like that, and I'm saying, I hear you, I'm upset about Israel, but I've got this abortion referendum or whatever on the ballot. If I don't vote to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get into the office, then I could literally have, an issue I care a lot about